Welcome back to the Woodhouse, day number 3. It's a big energy day. I am literally on fire. We just heard a great session with Bill Gates and other great leaders speaking about how we make sure we accelerate the innovation within renewable. This whole day has been exciting conversation at World Economic Forum, exciting conversation in the Female Quotient Lounge, an exciting conversation here at the virtual Woodhouse. As mentioned, Woods are running a virtual event next to the World Economic Forum. We are mid-week, so a lot of great sessions still to come the next 2 days. Wood as a company are supporting the World To-Do List, supply clean energy. And the session I just referred to was accelerating scaling up climate innovation. I'm so excited with this panel. Many of the people I had the fortune to meet when I was at COP for just a few months ago. It was actually in the beginning of November. So this session here will be about accelerating and scaling up climate innovation in mining, energy, and transportation. And I can promise you, we have some amazing thought leaders who is going to speak to all of you today. A very favorite person of me is Tatjana, who is the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of Leaders on Purpose. She will be the moderator of the session. And then we have Naeem, who is really the world champion. He is a global technical director, zero emission mobility, and really drive that thought leadership and business within Wood. Warm welcome to you, Naeem. Sanjay Bratsadas, he's a senior figure of the incredible digital economist. We will have Richard Taylor joining. He's the founder director of Green Lithium. I just want to say all of them was a COP on-site Glasgow. It was great to see you there. And now, of course, we're back on Zoom, but we will soon see each other again in person. Then we have Nicola Fierro, head of global sustainability, incredible thought leader within sustainability for NLX. Deena Ahmed, PhD, senior director strategy and government affairs, Our Next Energy. Great to be with you at COP. And then we have Amaranth Mike Hewitt, CEO and co-founder. He was also actually in Glasgow. So it is some really COP Glasgow people we are going to speak to here. Over to you, Tatjana.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you to this incredible panel coming together in a time where it's more necessary than ever, as we know, coming out of COP26. We have seen a lot of commitments, we have seen a lot of energy on the ground, but we also know that all of us and all others have been pushing towards this moment for such a long time, over decades, and 2022 is the year where we need to see transition solutions, we need to see scalability in the energy sector, and really also bringing science back to the forefront, bringing the society to the forefront in an equitable way of how we look at technology and the scalability of solutions to move towards actions and results, hopefully towards the end of the year, to be shared in Egypt. So I would love to kick off the session with each of you having a brief minute to introduce yourself and what you're doing in context of your organization and what you believe one of the critical solutions or milestones is in context of the session today. And maybe Satya, we can start with you.
Thank you very much, Tatjana. My name is Satya Bratsadas. I'm part of the leadership at the Digital Economist, which is a think and do tank, headquartered in Washington, DC, but global in its presence. We're really aiming to be thought leaders and leading advisors on climate resilience. And in that, we're delighted to have our partnership with Anne and Naeem at Wood, because while they're focused on the hard engineering, we do the soft engineering, as it were. And we are dedicating the whole coming year to producing thought leadership pieces and technical briefings on meeting the climate challenge leading up to Sharm el-Sheikh.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Satya. And it is so significant to have the right stories and really bring to the foresight of the people what is possible and what solutions we have to actually make a change. And maybe Naeem, and thank you so much also the Woodhouse for inviting us today to this agenda in conjunction with Davos. From your perspective, in a very quick introduction as well on this topic.
Hi, I'm Naeem Faruqi. As Anne mentioned, I'm the Global Technical Director for Zero Emission Mobility here at Wood. And at Wood, we're solving the complex transition challenges in the transportation stream, which I'm focused in, on helping heavy duty, light duty, and private passenger cars look at electric as well as hydrogen solutions in their required operations. So, it's an exciting time. The conversation is continuing, and I look forward to being here in this discussion.
Thank you so much, Naeem. And I hand over to Mike Hewitt from IP3. You've been also with us at COP26 and the solutions you're working on. We have just released now a new European taxonomy that allows to scale some of the solutions you're looking at. Maybe you can also briefly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Tatiana and Ann, and thank you to Woods House and also Leaders on Purpose for really bringing in a whole host of new thought leaders and voices and partners to the conversation. And I think COP26, from our perspective, was a huge victory because we do have new voices in the conversation from the business community, from the innovation community. And I think the future is now, as you say, IP3, which stands for International Peace, Power, and Prosperity, is a company we formed 6 years ago to really focus on not just climate change from a decarbonization perspective, but also recognizing the other key ingredients that will drive this conversation, such as abundant baseload power, population growth, urbanization, and all the other factors that will drive countries' decision-making with respect to climate change, and particularly recognizing that the emerging market nations who really haven't had a chance to industrialize yet to the level that they need to be part of this conversation. Our focus is on innovation, and specifically our focus is on hybrid nuclear power systems. So small modular reactors that can work alongside renewable energy, carbon capture. And you see many of the innovators in that space today. What we've developed, and as Tatiana referenced, is tying into ESG capital markets to invest in these emerging platforms, to invest in these emerging areas, and really opening the aperture of the ESG taxonomy into many, many more applications, be it hydrogen, desalination. Our focus is lack of water, lack of food, growing populations, and instability, and making sure we don't forget about those key attributes as we think about decarbonization. So thank you so much, Tatiana, for having us here today.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for sharing your perspectives on the work that you're doing. And Deena, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It was such a pleasure meeting you as well last year in Glasgow, and I would love to hear from you, brief introduction in the context of this panel to you, what it means to you, and some of your thoughts.
Great, thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, Anne and Wood, for hosting again. So I'm Deena, I'm leading strategy and government relations at One. We are a battery company headquartered in Michigan, and we're really working towards a paradigm shift where we believe that you can be more sustainable and safer in battery technology and still achieve consumer adoption through doubling the range. So a lot of the work that we're currently focusing on is how do we grow and scale manufacturing in the US through a more sustainable circular economy that allows us to engage the many partners to really impact climate action through technologies that are coming to fruition right now. So it's really exciting work, and really happy to be a part of this conversation today. So thank you for moderating.
Thank you so much. And I think one of the things that you just said, and we all know we are part of this paradigm shift, and the more incredible it is also to hear from the other two voices, Nicola Fierro, if you could also share a moment on yourself and what you're doing and the context of why you're here, this would be incredible.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicola Fierro, and I'm leading the sustainability global team of NLX, which is a part of NL Group. And the NL Group is one of the biggest utilities, started in Italy, but now present almost all over the world. We actually, in the last couple of years, we have been also at first place into the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which is an important thing I like to underline, to stress, but just to say how important has been this moment for the entire group, and how the entire group invested into this big change into sustainability, which is something important. It was a very important path for any utility, for a utility company. NLX is actually the innovation part of this utility. We're working specifically on sustainability, making public administration, final customers, and industrial, so business customers, becoming more sustainable through a process of understanding the level of sustainability and then guiding them through the technology change. So acquiring all the information from one side, but in the same time also giving them the technology they need to concretely make this change. So becoming more and more sustainable and circular, because as Deena mentioned before, the circular economy was actually one of our main priorities for the environmental part, while social inclusion is on the other side for completing the sustainability.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for sharing that, and I'm sure we will build more on this in a minute. Richard Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today as well. If you also briefly introduce yourself and why you're here today.
Thanks, Tatiana, Anne, and the Wood team for inviting me on the panel today. So I'm Richard Taylor, founding director of Green Lithium. Green Lithium, we are delivering the UK's first lithium refinery. Our mission is to enable the planet's transition to sustainable energy. And our vision is to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles and sustainable energy storage by increasing the localized supply of low carbon battery grade lithium products. So we've had to face many challenges in looking to do this, such as industrialized process as a refinery, and see how we can do it in a very sustainable, low carbon way. So I'm looking forward to sort of sharing with the panel ways that we've done that and ways that we can learn from each other and really build and go on with this transition together, because this is something that we all need to be talking about, and we need to be seeing ways that we can really come together to deliver the next phase of the world's energy needs. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard, and you as well. As you've shared, it's all of us together, and as we know, it's a real thing that we need to build coalitions and move as a big global coalition for this paradigm shift. More I'm excited about diversity in this panel, so we can learn from one another, share learnings, and we bring really together scalable, innovative solutions, science, policy, making to really understand also how can we unlock the next steps. And so in my next round, what I would love from each of you to understand is what are some of the solutions, to your point, you're working on that are working, but also where do you need support and help? What challenges do you see? And so that we can enable not only a accelerated sustainable solution, but one that is actually also an equitable transition. So things that we also need to manage, particularly in these traditionally sources of extractive industry coming towards new ways of energy sourcing. So with that, maybe Nicola, back to you. If you could share some of the activities and technologies you're involved in, and examples of integrating this with your priority on circular economy, but also maybe some of the challenges and questions and needs that you might have on this journey.
Okay. What I can say that maybe is to talk about two things to answer to your question. One is on one side there are technologies, which is extremely important to have, because otherwise we always talk about sustainability. We always talk about innovations, but we need to also talk about available technologies. So it means having economically available technologies, which means that they also have to be accessible for companies. Behind the acquisition of those technology, we need to have also a business model, because we are talking about businesses, and the businesses work that if I do an investment, like for example, a photovoltaic investment into photovoltaic, I need also to understand in how many years this investment is going to be repaid. And if I have a business model, even if I can make profit, for example, for the future. So often I am in many tables, many innovation tables, we always offer a wide range of innovation to companies, but those innovations are not economically available. So for companies, there is no really an economic advantage. So this is the first thing. And of course, we talk about the traditional technologies, but for example, NLX is leader into the electric mobility. Electric mobility is a big, we know, is a big revolution into our habits, for our cities, for actually the way how we move in general. And of course, first of all, for example, the technology which needs to be available to really develop the electric vehicle market are the infrastructures. Without infrastructures, people do not feel to actually really be confident, comfortable to buy an electric car. So the role, for example, of NLX into this specific sector, into the technology, was really to give this first important signal to the market and to the people. But behind also this technology, there is a very interesting, there are interesting applications, like for example, vehicle to grid. The vehicle to grid are virtual batteries, big batteries that can be made available to the system, to the grid operator, thanks to software. Thanks to software, it is possible also to aggregate the single batteries that are in the same time charging from different infrastructure, and then also providing extra services to the grid. Those services, why those services are extremely circular? Are extremely circular because in the past, those services were delivered through, for example, power plant built only to provide this service. While now, through software, we can provide the same services to the grid without having a power plant built, without having a power plant in operation. So you can imagine how this specific service is called the demand response. So this is how technology, how the world also could be behind of what we see is changing on the other side. But this is the technology part. On the other side, NLX developed a sustainability boosting program. The sustainability boosting program is, we believe, is an extremely revolution in terms of the way of approaching sustainability, because for the first time we decided to work on something that could really create and generate economic value for companies, for public administration, for final consumer. So what we do is, through the circular economy and through also the social inclusion, we generate ideas through a protocol we have developed, and through those ideas, we create new business, or we implement the business of existing products. But in the same time, we do, and of course, is the must of the program. We need to do circular economy. So we start doing circular economy. We start to do social inclusion. So that's a program that started initially, we developed internally to NLX, but then we are now applying also cross companies. So we are also applying to our partners, our clients. We are making the way that this program can really become a program available to every company that wants really to start this enormous cultural and organizational change. And I've been also working with the Aspen Institute, actually, for this specific program as one of the programs that could really change the world. And actually, this should be, we need the culture we need to be applied. So from one side, the technology, from the other side, a strong culture and a strong program that continuously is going to improve the level of circular economy and social inclusion of existing technology. So we never stop. We know that our technology are sustainable, but we do not stop to look to make them even more and more and more sustainable. So that's really the secret, and that's the way we are now actually in our strategy at the moment.
Incredible. Thank you so much. And yeah, such significant levers of change in the continuous and perpetual work on pushing the value, the circular value, sustainable value forward, to also learn how we can make this work and really link sustainability and the technology transition together is very significant. And Richard, based on your experience, and as we know, lithium and battery is highly interconnected. How are you working with these challenges and opportunities right now to be part of this global transition, but at the same time also an equitable transition?
Yeah, well, I think there is only one transition, because if you're not going green now, making that transition to be green, then you've not got a business. It's one way, and that's how we see it, that's how our partners see it, and that's how our customers see it. And it's making it a really united front. It's meaning that, you know, if we were having this conversation a year ago, it might have been a different thing. But now it's something that people and customers and stakeholders and the supply chain are insisting on. And to that point, we've just commissioned, we're just receiving the results back of our carbon life cycle assessment, to which we have analysed the refining method that we are using with material that's come from the mines that we'll be using to produce a battery grade product that we will be then selling to our customers, to demonstrate to them just exactly how much carbon we use at this point. Then we would like to demonstrate to them what our carbon reduction plan is over time to reach what is going to be quite an impressive carbon net zero operating ambition of a refinery in 2035. So it's a staged approach. It's not going to be easy. It brings in so many other players in the supply chain. We need green hydrogen to be up and running for this to work. We need it to be there in an economical way. For that, obviously, we need a lot of renewable green energy online. And this is probably one of the biggest issues that I foresee will happen with this transition, is availability of green electricity. Because without green electricity, we don't make green hydrogen, and that can then become an issue. So we're keeping our eye on the availability of green electricity a lot, as we're foreseeing that in the future that could become an issue. There are that many people needing now to use forms of green power. It is really becoming a commodity. So and we can't build it fast enough. If you actually look at examples for the UK alone, over the next 10 years, it needs an example of building 3 nuclear power stations the size of Hinkley Point C a year for the next 10 years for us to get to the position where we've got enough green electricity to fuel this green energy transition. Now, it's only when you bring stats like that in that you really have to sit up and realize that, you know, we're going to need to be innovative about this, and we're going to need to work together. So looking at things like potential nuclear options is an idea, but one that comes with its own problems. So I think, you know, the more we can focus on bringing tidal, bringing more wave, wind and solar onto the into the supply chain, the more that we can use technologies, like Nicola said, technologies that can really unlock different electric sources of power without having to bring on a new power station. That's that's really interesting to me, and I'm sure to everyone else on this call, hearing that that's the kind of technology that NL are looking at there. So we're going to be publishing our carbon life cycle assessment over the next month, and I invite you all to have a good read and see some of the initiatives that we're putting in there to really reduce our impact on the environment and to make sustainable supply chains that can really take us into this new green era.
Thank you so much, Richard. And you touched upon a lot of points that have been made towards what is actually needed to be able to achieve some of the targets, commitments that we have realistically. And this is the reason also for this panel and this conversation here in January, so that we can actually some of these solutions towards the end of the year and tackle in some way. And I think it's a perfect segue right now, Mike, over to you with the work that you are doing, and you've researched and been working for many years with your team, and we know that you've navigated a lot of discourse around it, but want to understand from your side your perspective on the technology and the equitability of the technology.
Thank you, Tatiana. And let me just say, I really associate with the comments of Nicola and Richard in particular. I think this is a wonderful group of panelists. And I think it starts with a recognition from Paris to COP26. We have to grade ourselves. Did we achieve the things that Paris actually set out, which at the time was a very broad goal of 2 degrees Celsius capping of temperature rise, but it didn't really have the kinds of measures of effectiveness in it that we needed to actually determine which programs could help us achieve those goals. I think further, we limited our thinking to decarbonization only, and then we further limited our thinking to really renewable energy as the solution, which we think is critically important, but as Richard said, it can only be a part of the solution. And so I think the realization at COP26, a very frank realization that the world needs much more energy than it has today. There is no cap on energy. And until you realize that just the electric vehicle market alone is going to demand twice as much power that we have today, and then you think about the natural resources. So I think the hubris of certain countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, which have the luxury of bringing in renewable energy because it has a lot of baseload power to back itself up with, is not the case in many of these nations, particularly many of the EU nations that are both the largest producers of carbon, yet have been limited by the EU in some of the new solutions that are out there. And we obviously believe very much in the advent of new nuclear power and small modular reactors that can come in and complement the work. My work in the UK, and as Richard said, the UK, just for nuclear power alone, can't meet net zero unless it, as you said, build three more large-scale plants a year for 10 years. That's the same case everywhere else. And so I think it's important that we understand that this is a world that needs much more power. I think the metrics need to be completely different. We need to be thinking about something that a lot of people don't like to talk about, which is energy per capita. I can look at a successful nation and really say that's a successful nation because it uses a lot of energy. So we have to stop thinking there's a cap on the amount of energy that we can produce and really open up the innovation to it. The other thing that I think is really important is, and you mentioned equitable transition. Countries that haven't been able to industrialize can't be asked to participate in the same decarbonization plan that countries that have been able to industrialize. And it's not about sharing the transition cost, it's about building energy solutions that work for the sovereignty of every single nation. And I think what COP26 came away with is a realization that fossil fuel is part of the solution. It isn't the problem. You have to manage it and the transition of it effectively. And I think nuclear power will be a key part of that. And as you know, we focus on getting out of the electricity sector as the decarbonization solution and inviting in the industries that actually need the power to be a part of it. And so if you take Amazon alone, their two biggest industries, one are data centers, and the other is distribution centers. Both of those require a lot of energy. The data centers are not going to run on the back of renewable energy alone. They're going to demand baseload power. So asking an Amazon to think about what its use of power needs to be and be part of developing those new power solutions is really where we are going. So we talk about it in terms of privatization, industry to industry, matching up the applications such as hydrogen production with its source of energy and not depending upon the government to provide that power. You really pull the right kind of power to your industry. And it really is about privatizing and inviting the commercial markets to participate in climate change. We think the ESG criteria has been very limiting in inviting in new ideas. And so we're very excited to see the EU lifting its restriction on nuclear power and even some gas programs in the taxonomy. We think that is going to open up capital markets to invest in these ideas. We also think that we have to think about the hard to decarbonize industries, steel production, hydrogen, desalinization. These are industries that are critically important to climate change because we have to think about climate change in terms of water shortages, food security, population growth. So matching up the hard to decarbonize industries with the power sector and saying, I want you two to work it out together. In other words, if I challenge the steel industry to decarbonize by telling me what types of power they need, I think we can come up with a better solution. So we're actually seeing that happen right now, whether it's batteries, whether it's natural resources. And again, I am biased towards new nuclear power and hybrid nuclear systems because building modular reactors allow me to scale the power source from 1 megawatt to 300 megawatts. It also allows me to match up the thermal application of the reactor to the output I'm trying to create. So for example, producing hydrogen most cost effectively is at 700 degrees Celsius. So you're changing the electrolysis process completely. The same with desalinization. Anything we want to do in energy is better done with heat than it is with kilowatts. So inviting in new ideas around these kinds of applications is where our focus has been. And I think, let me touch on the final thing, Tatiana, which is where do we need help? I think the governments, frankly, need to get out of the way and empower the private sector and empower innovation to be part of the solution. The analogy we always use is the space industry. The space industry was government run. It really had no private sector involvement. It had no innovation, and it really wasn't serving the nations that used it for its benefit until Musk and Bezos and Branson came along and privatized space. We are very excited about privatizing climate change and allowing the free market enterprise to make money reducing carbon. And I think as soon as we do that, then we are going to unlock innovation and ideas. And really the government is best served providing national security and better served allowing the industry and those on this panel to do what they do really well. So again, that's our thinking on this. And I think we're absolutely moving in the right direction. And COP27, between Davos, Leaders on Purpose, UN General Assembly, and COP27, I think we have 3 unbelievable events coming up that we're going to be able to really tee these things up with commercial solutions that invite in the sovereign wealth funds, the institutional investors, the pension funds. They are dying to invest their money in new ideas, and we just want to give them the opportunity to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for elaborating this for us. And absolutely, the climate change and the solutions needs to be a truly global conversation in our society. And all those affected by the transition need to be part of this. And one particular issue, of course, is also energy storage and accessibility during this kind of time. And Deena, I know that this is something that you are working on. So if you could share from your point of view, what are the most significant solutions you are looking at in your roadmap towards COP27 and adding to this conversation of solutionists here?
Absolutely, and really phenomenal conversation thus far, and I resonate with a lot of what's being said. I think the way that we're approaching is very much as a private sector player that is innovating in this space. And so we just did a 752-mile range run on a single charge in a Tesla that we retrofitted, and that demonstration really represents what's possible in this industry in terms of meeting consumer demands and having products that can actually move the needle and move the market. But what we're really also thinking about as we scale to manufacturing is how do we be systems driven in order to understand the opportunities to decarbonize all the way from the raw material supply chain up to the products, up to the way in which we can interface through our customers even with the grid and the energy markets writ large. And I think these opportunities are diverse globally. And as a company, we're really working to be mindful of those opportunities and connecting with partners, which is why these types of conversations are so important, because this transition is not singularly possible by any one entity, and it takes many players at the table to move the needle. We're looking at new models for manufacturing. We're looking at new efficiencies for making cells that actually drop the energy consumption by 50%. That's pretty significant in the step towards decarbonizing this industry and also making the energy transition and energy storage more sustainable. We then need to be working with solar and other renewable energy sources and partners to be further facilitating that transition, because energy storage is really the key to storing all of the clean energy that we can produce and regulating power and in many different settings, particularly in emerging markets. So what I'm focused on right now is our plans for scaling cell manufacturing and looking at innovations like what Richard is doing in decarbonizing refinement and thinking about the circular economy and how we can participate there in terms of shifting to secondary usage and lengthening the life of these assets, because ultimately batteries are from minerals, which is still a natural resource. And so I think in these conversations, it's also so important for us to reflect on what are the challenges that we're facing even within the adoption of some of these clean tech opportunities. And if we're really mindful and we engage in these radically transparent, open conversations, we can then iteratively move towards a decarbonized world where we're not claiming that we can abandon fossil fuels immediately, or that it's only solar, only wind, or only energy storage, but it is the right mixture that scales up at the right time period. So I think what we're really excited about as well is the opportunity to shift the paradigm in the way in which energy can be democratized. And we see energy storage, we're a battery company in Michigan, and a lot of the ethos of that is automotive, and where many of our customers are obviously in the automotive sector. We are considering ourselves energy storage because we see that this is a much larger industry to be paying attention to and to be growing into, and those opportunities are global, and they shift in terms of like the community needs. And when we think about equity and the opportunity to deliver equitable solutions, I think it is really valuable when the private sector starts to have those conversations that push on our innovation, so that the innovations that we're doing and the technologies we're bringing to the market actually can take root also in emerging markets and in other settings, and aren't just designed for the North American market. So the range run in 752 miles in a Tesla, that's like really exciting, but what does that mean to the whole world? Well, what we hope it means is that there's a lot of possibilities in this energy transition, and so we will be participating and moving that needle. But it doesn't just take one company, it takes partners, public-private partnerships that sustain and move this forward.
Thank you, Deena, and I think we couldn't agree more with all of the points you have just mentioned, and some of the most significant points where we also focus on is exactly your point, the open conversation, the iteration, and particularly if purpose-aligned and purpose-driven partners come together, the innovations that they will produce, this is essentially bringing upon systems change, because we are doing the work then every day, try to understand how we can push the needle whilst not fall into a trap of just delivering maybe another industry or transition industry that is lacking again on values that are significant to our value system we want to transition towards to. And from this perspective, Satya, I would love to ask you as well what your perspective is on the transition economy, on the energy transition from a equity side of view and policy side of view.
Thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, dear colleagues, for a fascinating discussion. For me, if we're going to accelerate transition, we need integration. We need a best practices table. We need a transparent way that doesn't necessarily impose or impact on proprietary secrets, simply to share, integrate, and to curate best practices. And that's part of the effort that we at the Digital Economist would be delighted to be part of, with the Woodhouse initiative that started with Leaders on Purpose. We're also working with the Institute of Electric and Electronic Engineers, who have now incorporated human-centered design principles into all engineering. We really need to find a way to converge ourselves, because what we learned from Glasgow was not so much the final communique, if I may, but the 3 days after COP26. We saw every leader go home with great intentions, and in 90% of the cases, they all came to a crashing halt on the rocks of domestic politics. So this reliance and this hope that we can turn this huge behemoth of the UNFCCC into something nimble and agile and responsive is still a hope. We need to converge more tables like we have one here. And again, we need to keep these tables going and these conversations going. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, we at Glasgow, we provoked a deep conversation that's still ongoing by calling for a global carbon levy on production of fossil fuels to fund and exceed the Paris Agreement. And today, in conjunction with the virtual Davos that's being held, we are releasing an analytic tool that we call a 6D vision to accelerate the transition and convergence. So in order to enable decarbonization, digitalization, and decentralization, which go together, we're putting them in the context and framework of development, which has to be inclusive by nature to achieve global climate resilience, dignity, because it has to be human-centered and keep humanity at the center, and perhaps most controversially, disarmament, in that as the COVID pandemic has showed us, sometimes enemies are those that you cannot see. And in terms of conventional defense responses and military spending, if a portion of that is diverted to climate resilience, then we can defend ourselves against a planetary crisis. And we are really intent on converging conversations, driving solutions, and bringing people together to break down the barriers that exist between different silos of endeavor. Indeed, we have 4 battery-related companies here today and 4 energy-related, and we have a Naeem, somebody who is determined to drive absolute zero-emission mobility. So already we have the beginnings of a collaboration. So the challenge for us is, how do we transcend nationalism? How do we transcend national governance and bring together leadership in many different spheres and convene them and keep the conversations going so that we can curate the best practices that are available, that are scalable, and that are applicable?
Thank you, Satya, so much. And yeah, this is highly also in the ethos with Leaders on Purpose and also the Davos week here right now, keeping this conversation going. And we would love to learn more throughout the year, how also maybe some of your learnings and suggestions to really bring us further towards outcomes. And Naeem, from your perspective, working on transition, focused on transportation, what would you say are the key leverage points we need to look at this year so that we have some outcomes towards COP27 that we can finally share as to have more hope when we come together in Egypt?
Yeah, no, I think it starts with policy and government programs. Incentives are very critical to fill the gap. I think Richard, Mike, Satya, Deena, Nicola, we're all speaking about those points. I think that's a good starting frame. And then proving the business case through adoption. And, if you look, Deena mentioned Detroit, the capital of the automotive world. All the big American car manufacturers have brought out pickup trucks that are electric. I know it sounds corny, but that's a sign of the times. That is the vehicle that defines America, which is still the largest automotive consumer in the world, right? It is a huge player in this world, in that space. And the fact that you've got a Ford Lightning, you've got the Chevy announced, GM announced, that's great examples after COP of practical movement. I don't think we can solve everything, but we need nudges. And, NLX is another great example of a company that is actually pioneering that. They've actually entered the Canadian market, my market, just recently with a partnership to bring EV charging to multi-home and buildings. So there's a lot of movement happening. And I think, again, it starts at that policy level, as Satya was talking about, getting people around the table, having those conversations. And it's not about someone's bottom line. It's about the world's bottom line at this point. And we need to think about how collectively we can move it. And, there's just so much phenomenal stuff that's happened since Glasgow. And, I've been following Deena's work at Our Next Energy, and that Tesla doing 752 miles. That's a great, statement that EV range anxiety is a thing of the past, and it's time to move on and think about how we deploy.
Thank you so much, Naeem and Anne. We are at the end of the session, and so based on your perspective from the outcomes of decision and what you would like to see towards COP27 coming out of this collective here, maybe you can share one last remark in this group.
Thank you so much. And it has been interesting to pull together this virtual Woodhouse. Because I think you all touched on it, and it's been with all the conversation we had Monday, Tuesday, and today, is that it was very special to go to COP26. It was like a new beginning. We got a second chance, also based on the whole COVID situation, we got a second chance. We came together. We have this whole big climate crisis in front of us, and we're very humble about it. And I think it was very important for me, even though we couldn't go in person to Davos, that we convene, just like you said, Sergey, because we started something very special at COP26. We are committed, we are accountable. And what you said, Naeem, about following Deena, what the work you guys are doing, or I'm following closely Green Lithium, what you guys are doing, and Leaders on Purpose. I think what is happening right now is that we care not just about what we do ourselves, but we care about what others are doing, because we know we can't solve the things alone. So there is much more like a convenient progress happening right now. And I think that, for me, is a big theme of World Economic, coming out of COP into World Economic Forum, is that we're all in it together, and we care about not just what we do, but what others are doing, and we do it together. So I really enjoy listening to all of you guys. You are so strong in each of your domains. And I can promise you one thing, that the Woodhouse, whatever we are in person, that we will definitely also be, we will have the virtual Woodhouse keep on having those convenience. You mentioned it, Mike. We have some very big milestones this year. We have the General Assembly, the Climate Week, G7, G20, the Ocean Summits, and we have big COP27. And how dare we going to COP27 without having done a big progress, right? So that's why we will convene at this virtual Woodhouse and in person to make sure we keep the promise that we did in COP26. That's what this is all about. So I want to say thank you. Big thanks, Deena, for your amazing, and thanks to all of you. This is the last session today on the third day, my special day, because it's the Energy Day. And we are back tomorrow morning, actually with an early session. We just launched out of COP, actually, our hydrogen white paper together with Reuters. And we are kicking off tomorrow with that session, but then tomorrow it is the big ESG day at World Economic Forum. So therefore, stay tuned. And if you haven't seen the session today on the World Economic Forum, go back and see them, some great speakers, some great commitments. And then see you soon in the virtual Woodhouse or in person in the Woodhouse. I just want to say, for you who didn't go to the Woodhouse in Glasgow, it do exist, and it still exists. It is actually the Wood office. So the people that is part of Wood in Glasgow, they live in the virtual or in the physical Woodhouse. So it's a real thing that you're seeing behind Naeem and me. And for you who were there, you saw it in person. So thank you so much, and speak soon again. Bye.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.